Chapter 2. Euphorbia hermentiana, Cereus peruvianus, Hoya carnosa. Ray read out loud the names of the cacti, names that Summer could not pronounce. Cleistocactus rea, planted by Silvana Suarez, Miss World 1979. Really? He made a face. It made Summer smile. It was the second time she had seen him outside work, and it still felt strange, new and happy, like seeing a baby walk for the first time. The first time had been Saturday when she went to the public library with Yasmin. Yasmin was Ray's secretary. A glass door connected her office with Ray's so that when Summer went to see him, she could see while they talked, Yasmin furiously typing, her straight black hair hiding her face. Yasmin's parents were from Pakistan, but she was born and had lived all her life in different parts of Britain. She had a habit of making general statements starting with we, where we meant the whole of the third world and its people. So she would say, "We're not like them," or "We have close family ties, not like them." There were two other department secretaries who worked in the same room as Yasmin. Cheerful, coffee-scented ladies with graying hair and pleated skirts. When one of them once patted the curves of her stomach and bemoaned the fact that she could not stick long to any diet, Yasmin was quick to say, "Our children are dying of hunger while the rich count their calories." Yasmin's husband Nazim worked some of the time on the oil rigs offshore. When he was away, she tended to meet Summer at the weekends. Yasmin had a car, and Summer liked driving around, listening to the radio, seeing parts of the city she had not seen before. She wished she could have a car and escape the weather. That Saturday, they went to the library because Yasmin, now 10 weeks pregnant, wanted to look at baby books. There were shelves of books about pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding. The library was warm, full of people, full of books. There were books on cesarean birth, abortions, infertility, and miscarriage. Summer had miscarried once, a year after her son was born. She remembered the night, fateful and climactic, coming after days of anxiety, days of awareness that this pregnancy was not going right. Something was wrong. She remembered Tariq being calm, warm, and sure of what to do. She remembered him on his hands and knees mopping the bathroom floor, her womb that had fallen apart. There was gratitude between them. Gratitude cushioned the quarrels, petty and deep. It leveled the dips in affection. Sometimes this gratitude came to her in trances and in dreams, dreams with neither settings nor narratives, just a feeling, distilled. "I can only take 6 books, Yasmin was saying. "If you had a card, I could borrow on yours." "That's an idea. Let's get you a card." "No, some other time." She did not like doing things impulsively, without warning. She looked at the queues which stretched out from the desk, the librarians running pens over the barcodes on the books. They made her nervous. She tried to sound convincing. "You'll never read more than 6 books in a month. 6 is enough." But Yasmin insisted, giving her a lecture on how a library card was a right. "You pay tax, don't you?" she said, and told her how a Nigerian woman with 3 children had lived in Aberdeen for 7 years before finding out that she was entitled to child benefit. "No one told her," Yasmin screeched in a whisper. 12 books on pregnancy made their way to the counter. Yasmin did all the talking. Summer felt like a helpless immigrant who didn't know any English. She imagined the English words lifting away from her brain, evaporating, forming a light mist. It was one of the things that Mahasan had said to her the night of their quarrel, almost trembling with anger, fluent with righteousness. The night when Summer had asked her permission to marry Ahmed Ali Yassin. "An educated girl like you. You know English. You can support yourself and your son. You don't need marriage." What do you need it for? He started talking to me about this and I silenced him. I shamed him, the old fool. He's religious, Summer had choked the words. He feels a duty towards widows. He can take his religiousness and build a mosque, but keep away from us. In the past, widows needed protection. Life is different now. She had wanted to say something in reply, but the words stuck in her throat like dough. Ray's book, said Yasmin just as they were leaving. Did you see it? I'm sure it's here. Nobody reads these kinds of things. With their 12 books, they went back to the history section and searched, finally finding The Illusion of an Islamic Threat upstairs, classified under politics. On the back, Summer read in italics what others said about it. Brings a new understanding to the turbulent situation in the Middle East. Independent on Sunday. Aisle sets out to prove that the threat of an Islamic takeover of the Middle East is exaggerated. His arguments are bold, his insights provocative. The Scotsman. They talked about him when they left the library, their voices carrying above the sound of the traffic and the cold wind. Summer wanted to know about his ex-wives. The first, Yasmin said, was married now and living in Wales. She belonged to the distant past. Yasmin had never met her. The second, the mother of the daughter who was in boarding school in Edinburgh, worked for the WHO, World Health Organization, in Geneva. They used to live in cults, a nice big house. Then he moved to a flat in town. Yasmin drove erratically. The books slid and parted in the back seat. She parked in a tree-lined street in a part of town that was unfamiliar to Summer. This is where he lives, she said. I've come here often with Nazim. It's good that you're with me. I can give him these faxes that came for him yesterday after he went home. He's waiting to hear any moment now from the anti-terrorist program. They're gonna take him on as a consultant. We can't do that. It's not right, said Summer. Give them to him on Monday. But Yasmin was already unclasping her seat belt, switching the heating off, pulling up the handbrake. We're together, she answered. It's not as if either of us is on her own. He might not be in anyway, Summer went on. Yasmin was out of the car. Summer still tied in by her seat belt. It was getting dark. The clouds were plastered purple against the sky, the sun far away. When Ray opened the door, fur brushed against Summer's knees. It was a large black cat which made its way indoors with them. Summer was wary of cats. When she was young, stray cats had sneaked indoors and shocked her by jumping out of cupboards or from underneath the stairs. They were savage cats, their ribs visible against matted, dirty fur. Some had a black hole instead of an eye. Some had stumpy legs, amputated tails. While she screamed, they ran back and forth in the room, desperately seeking an exit. It seemed to her that they clambered the walls, clawed the paint, cried furiously like she was trying to get out of the trap they had voluntarily entered and back to the outdoor life they knew. Tariq had a story about stray cats, the ones that lived around the hospital. Their favorite meal, he said, comes every time a baby is born. They wait around the dustbins. One juicy placenta drops in and you should see how they fight for it. He liked to tease her with gory hospital stories, laugh at the expression on her face. Ray's cat was slow and well-fed. She walked glossy and serene around the room while he greeted Yasmin and Summer and showed them in. What happened to your hair? Was the first thing Yasmin said. His hair was cut so short that it stood up from his head like spikes. He laughed and patted his head, saying, I guess the barber was overzealous this time. He looked different from how he was at work. He was not wearing a tie and had not shaved. It seemed to Summer that the flat was not very large. The room they sat in was attached to the kitchen. Large bay windows overlooked the road, and on the other side of the room, over the kitchen sink, was another window with yellow blinds. There were books lined under the window and the weekend supplement spread out on the floor. The cat climbed up and sat on Summer's knees. She did not know what to do. She had not looked at a cat closely like this before, not seen the yellow slits of its iris, the shine on its perfect black coat. She stroked it awkwardly and listened to Yasmin and Ray talking about the faxes, the weather outside, the headlines on the newspaper that Ray now picked up from the floor and folded away. I loathe all this fuss about the royals, Yasmin was saying. Loathe was another one of the words that Yasmin often used. I loathe this shitty British weather. Ray went to make tea. The cat left Summer's lap and she began to look around on the rugs on the wall, the copper plant pots on the floor. There was a photograph of Ray's daughter on top of a shelf of books. She looked like she was around 10 or 11 and was riding a horse. She wore boots and a cap with straps long along her chin. Summer imagined the child's mother with the same long brown hair, courageous too, working for the WHO, an important job, doing good, helping people. She thought as she drank her tea that she was in a real home. She had not been in a real home for a long time. She lived in a room with nothing on the wall, nothing personal, no photographs, no books, just like a hospital room. She had given everything away that week before taking Tariq's home. She had stripped everything and given it away, never imagining she would come back, never imagining the quarrel with Mahasin. And when she did come back, she had neither the heart nor the means to buy things. Pay the rent for the room, and that was all. 1 plate, 1 spoon, a tin opener, 2 saucepans, a kettle, a mug. She didn't care, didn't mind. For years, ill in a hospital she had made for herself. Ill, diseased with passivity, time in which she sat doing nothing, the whirlpool of grief sucking time, hours flitting away like minutes, days in which the only thing she could rouse herself to do was pray the 5 prayers. They were the only challenge, the last touch with normality. Without them she would have fallen, lost awareness of the shift of day into night. She tasted the tea Ray had made for her and listened to the only 2 people she really knew in this city. Yasmin, her face a little pinched in the early weeks of pregnancy, dark shadows under her sleepy eyes. But that was natural. She would be big and healthy in a few months' time, round in maternity clothes. And Ray, it was strange to see people she only knew from work in their own homes. He didn't shave at weekends. One of the magazines that lay open on the floor had pictures of different world maps. It was an article on traditional maps and how they tended to show continents incorrectly in proportion to one another. Europe appeared larger than South America, North America larger than Africa, Greenland larger than China, when the opposite was true. In the latest equal area map, Africa was a massive elongated yellow, Britain a rosy insignificance. Somewhere in this vast yellow, near the blue that marked the flow of the Nile, was the life she had been exiled from. She knelt and sat on her heels to look more closely. The familiar names of towns, in black type against the yellow, moved her. Kassala, Darfur, Sennar, Kadulgi, Karima, Wow. Inside her was their sheer dust and meagerness, sunshine and poverty, voices of those who endured because they asked so little of life. On the next page of the magazine there was an advertisement for educational materials. Schoolgirls in Somalia smiling arm in arm, short-sleeved white shirts under a navy pinafore, white belts around their waists. She had dressed like that, been a face like that once, hair carefully brushed, white socks and the white belt. She remembered walking with friends, her fingers hooked in their belts, tugging. Hurry, the canteen will run out of bezinos. The bottles had little bumps all round, pretty curved bumps. The bezinos was pink and sweet, never cold enough. Smooth, the sand under your foot. Pat it flat, very flat. Hold the empty bottle. Don't cheat and bend your knees. Let it drop. If it stands, then what? Your wish will come true, or he loves you too. When she looked up, Ray was watching her, a look in his eyes like kindness. Encouraged, she said, I used to wear a uniform like that in secondary school. They made us wear shorts, he said. Even in winter. It was awful, walking to school in the cold. I was glad when I got expelled. You got expelled from school? Asked Yasmin. What terrible thing did you get up to? I wrote an essay. He was laughing so that Summer did not know whether he was joking or not. I wrote an essay entitled, Islam is Better Than Christianity. Yasmin started to laugh. Liar, I don't believe you. You're making this up. No, it's true. This was in the 50s. They probably wanted to expel me anyway, and this was the last straw. Why, did you write something like that? I had an uncle who went to Egypt with the army in the Second World War. When he got there, he became interested in Sufism, converted to Islam, and left the army. You can imagine he was considered a traitor, a defector. My grandmother told people that he was missing in action. She kept saying it until she believed it, and everyone else in the family came to believe it too. Uncle David wrote to her, and to my mother too, explaining why he had done what he did. Summer closed the magazine. Ray sat back in his chair. He coughed and blew his nose in a large blue handkerchief. He looked as if this was a story he told often and liked to tell again. I read this letter. It was, I think, the first time I came across the word Islam and understood what it meant. Of course, I was aware that my uncle had done something scandalous, and I was curious. Also, I had this essay that I had to write for school. I wish that I still had David's letter now, or even the essay, because, and he paused, I plagiarized the whole paragraphs. The title, though, was mine. David never, of course, wrote that Islam was better than Christianity. He didn't use that word. Instead, he said things like, it was a step on in the way that Christianity followed Judaism. He said that the Prophet Muhammad was the last in a line of prophets that stretched from Adam to Abraham through Moses and Jesus. They were all Muslims. Jesus was a Muslim in a sense that he had surrendered to God. This did not go down very well in the letter, nor in the essay. Ray was laughing again. And so what happened to your uncle? Summer asked. Did he ever come back? He couldn't come back, even if he had wanted to. He would have been arrested. Defection, treason, these are serious charges. He kept writing for some years to my mother. He changed his name, married an Egyptian woman, and had children. I had Egyptian cousins, relatives in Africa. I was very excited by that. I thought it was very romantic, but my mother never answered his letters or maybe sent him nasty letters in return. So he stopped writing. I went looking for him for 5 years between 1976 and 1981 when I was in Cairo teaching at the AUC, but I couldn't find him. I wouldn't mind going over to look for him again. They were quiet when he finished speaking. Summer felt that she and Yasmin had been in his flat for a long time. The afternoon in the library seemed distant. Another day. The last drops of tea in her mug looked like honey. Then Yasmin started to talk of people's intolerance, and Summer got up to wash the mugs in the kitchen. It will only take a minute, she said to Ray when he told her to leave them, not to bother. But she took her time and looked around. A bottle of Safeway olive oil stood on the kitchen counter, an open packet of soluble aspirins, more photographs of the daughter, younger and smiling, were stuck to the door of the fridge. On the wall, there was a print of the Uleg Beg Mosque in Samarkand, its exterior designed with the interlacing, intricate patterns of Islamic art. It was built in 1418, the caption read, and was both a masjid and a school that taught not only religious sciences but astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. Summer rolled the blind up over the kitchen window, and she could see in the dark a garden shed, lights in the other buildings, the auras of people's lives, warm water, lather that smelt of lemon. Ray's voice. At times, the courts here do show cultural sensitivity, he was saying, and each case sets a precedent for others to follow. In one case, a high court judge awarded a divorced Asian woman damages in thousands of pounds against her husband. He had slandered her by suggesting she was not a virgin at the time of their wedding. The grounds for the case were that the insult was very serious in her community. Yes, we prize virginity, Yasmin said, and chastity. It's hard to believe that a British judge and jury could understand that, let alone sympathize. People understand it, but in the context of its own place, its own part of the world. Here, though, it's a different story. I would think that the consensus is, in Rome, do as the Romans do. Typical imperialist thinking. You're right, he said, but these things take time to change. Not in our lifetime, I don't think. In your lifetime, said Yasmin. We're young, aren't we, Summer? Summer turned around. Her hands were wet with soap and she held them above the sink. You're younger than me, she said to Yasmin. I'm gonna be 30 next week, said Yasmin. My birthday and Nazim will be away as usual. He's still offshore? Asked Ray. Off Shetland, freezing away. Poor thing, but it's so peaceful without him. You say things you don't mean, Yasmin, said Summer. She turned off the taps and wiped the basin with the washcloth. There were stains around the plug and in between the taps. Chekhov wrote, said Ray, that a woman pines when she is deprived of the company of a man, and when deprived of the company of a woman, a man becomes stupid. Rubbish, said Yasmin. I never pine. Summer looked around for a towel to wipe her hands. The towel she found hanging on the back of a chair had a picture of a dolphin on it. The cat was nowhere in sight. It had gone outside and it was time for them to leave too. We should go, shouldn't we? She said to Yasmin when she joined them. It's getting late. I'm so tired I can't move, Yasmin said, and Summer had to hold both her hands and pull her up. What are you gonna be like in a few months' time? She teased her, and they were laughing when Ray opened the front door and walked with them down the steps. Outside, Summer stepped into a hallucination in which the world had swung around. Home had come here. Its dimly lit streets, its sky, and the feel of home had come here and balanced just for her. She saw the sky cloudless with too many stars, imagined the night warm, warmer than indoors. She smelled dust and heard the barking of stray dogs among the street's rubble and potholes. A bicycle bell tinkled. Frogs croaked. The muezzin coughed into the microphone and began the azan for the Isha prayer. But this was Scotland, and the reality left her dulled, unsure of herself. This had happened before, but not for so long, not so deeply. Sometimes the shadows in a dark room would remind her of the power cuts at home, or she would mistake the gurgle of the central heating pipes for a distant azan. But she had never stepped into a vision before. Home had never come here before. It took time to take in the perfect neatness of the buildings and the gleaming road. It took time for the heating in Yasmin's car to clear the mist of their breath on the window panes. They drove through streets bright with lamplight, full of cars. Young people strolled along Union Street as if they did not feel the cold. Saturday night. Another world. Ray is different, Summer said. Her voice made it sound like a question. In what way? He's sort of familiar, like people from back home. He's an Orientalist. It's an occupational hazard. Summer did not like the word Orientalist. Orientalists were bad people who distorted the image of the Arabs and Islam. Something from school history or literature she could not remember. Maybe modern Orientalists were different. Her eyesight was becoming blurred. She felt tired, deflated. The headlights of the cars were too bright, round, savage circles crossed by swords. Do you think he could one day convert? Mirages shimmered on the asphalt. Yasmin snorted. That would be professional suicide. Why? Because no one will take him seriously after that. What would he be? Another ex-hippie gone off to join some weird cult? Worse than a weird cult, the religion of terrorists and fanatics. That's how it would be seen. He's got enough critics as it is. Those who think he's too liberal, those who would even accuse him of being a traitor just by telling the truth about another culture. A traitor to what? To the West. You know, the idea that the West is best. But you can never tell about people, said Summer. Look at this uncle of his. Are you hoping he would convert so you could marry him? Don't be silly. I was just wondering. She breathed in and out as if it was an effort. Her eyes ached. Her nose ached. I was just wondering because he knows so much about Islam. This annoys him. What annoys him? That Muslims expect him to convert just because he knows so much about Islam. They had reached Summer's place by then. She could hardly open her eyes to put the key in the lock. Light was a source of suffering and a headache, pain greater than childbirth. Inside, she wanted to hit her head against something to dislodge what was inside. Sleep, which came so easily in this hospital room, in layers and hours, would not come now. The silence, the absence of pain would not come. Ya Allah, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. When sleep finally came, it was desperate unconsciousness. She woke up clear, weightless, full of calm. She thought she must have had something between a migraine and a fit.